aware. Any quiet discussions we might have amongst ourselves. So we will begin seeing it's 1 o'clock. Hi, am I? Welcome to the Southland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group. So I'll ask for any apologies, please. Mayor Clark.
I guess Ben for lateness and me in the meantime.
Yeah, Bill. Right. If somebody want to move, we accept. Thank you, Rob. Seconded by. Okay. Thanks, Keith. You can do that. Yes. So those in favour, we say aye. The confirmation of the minutes of our previous meeting, which was in June, according to my page. Seems a while ago. That's correct. Time flies. Right, was someone who was present at that meeting. We believe that it's a correct record of the meeting of the committee.
I was there.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on a motion that that's a correct record, Christine?
No, not on the fact that it's correct. So just not on the fact that it's correct, just the matters arising.
Matters arising. Right, we'll move it to the correct record of the meeting. All in favour?
Right.
Okay, thank you. So you say that there's some matters arising, Christine?
Well, just going through the minutes, there appear to be 3 things. I forgot to bring my list, sorry, of the queries, so I'm going from memory. But I think for one, I thought there was agreement that the terms of reference be noted at the beginning of the agenda.
That's true.
And I understood there was going to be an answer around Ms. Scott's question around depreciation. And I understood that there was discussion about holding a workshop with Ali just around responses, I guess, to emergencies being held. So just whether we have a date for that or not.
Right, well, no, the terms of reference should be at the front of the agenda, so we can make sure that's included in the future. The depreciation question, I would expect me what that was about.
Yeah, and 9.4, I asked a question on depreciation, and Mr. Fraser was going to get back to me.
So, but they haven't. No. So we need to have that as an action.
And just for that workshop as well.
Yes.
There's an expectation there's going to be a workshop prior to this meeting to actually meet Ali and go through and have a bit of a chat.
Yes, you're right. So, now do you see a need for that workshop post this meeting? Not particularly today. I don't want to add to the list of things we've had this week.
I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it'd be good to have a catch up.
Schedule a workshop, catch up. You are a new manager. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
It's our first meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry,
well,
I wonder if it'd be helpful just to have a list of action points from the minutes from last time so we can keep the
So they'll be recorded yet. Is there anything else, Christine?
That's what's in my memory bank. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we come to item 6, which is reports. Point 1, group chairs report.
Happy to talk to that, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, if you would like.
Yes, thank you.
So the CAG meeting, or the Coordinating Executive Group meeting, was last Friday. It was generally well attended, with the exception, unfortunately, Paul. I don't think were present, and New Zealand Police unfortunately weren't here either. And an apology was from Department of Conservation, who were dealing with a restructuring proposal. And I think Health were in a very similar situation, although present, they're also dealing with restructuring. As chair, I would encourage the members to make sure that they are represented around the table, because these are significant matters, and the provision of emergency management for Southland is a fairly complex and significant enterprise. As chair, we're very heartened to see the progress that the EMS team are making across in the building, and the ability to stand up quickly during the earthquake and potential tsunami recently was testament to the work that's going on in there. The KEG has passed through to you, and therefore to the councils, a number of reports around resourcing and funding. I think that they will call into, or put into the spotlight, the challenges that the shared service is probably going to find as it needs to be delivered effectively, and also the changes that are likely to be coming through with the amendments to the legislation. I'd also like to thank Ali and the team for preparing the submission that went to the emergency management consultation. The other matter, though, that we did talk about at length, and it's covered again in this agenda, is the issues around the building that the EMS are operating out of. And KEG very specifically requested that there be some immediate work done on that. And if I was to just draw your attention to the bit that we were talking about on page 32 of the agenda, KEG asked for the immediate remedial work to be undertaken to tighten connections and install missing tie rods in reinforced structural elements. So the proposal that had come to KEG was to look at remediating this site or potential uses of this site, or to look at, in the longer term, maybe an emergency management precinct somewhere else. Both are great ideas, but in the short term, with the team in the building that is providing the service, we are requesting that immediate work be done. We also requested from Environment Southland what has been spent on the building, and where has the funds from the three councils gone over the last few years. So just to make sure we understand what the future costs are likely to be, what the implications are for the work that's been highlighted as having not been done in around that building. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I see that your meeting was 3 days ago, so you won't have received those costs, maintenance record for that building?
No, you're correct.
I'm anticipating?
You are correct.
Right.
We have not received
So I'm still waiting for that. Okay. You won't have seen that, a breakdown of those either, probably. Yes. Right, so discussion on that particular topic, yes.
Well, yeah, that has raises a few concerns, Mr. Chairman. I know there was considerable money spent when that building was put on, and it was specified to be up to earthquake standard. So my questions are, if the contractor did not complete the job to specification as a liability, and was the building code sign off? We thought that should have all been signed off. So I'm sure we must have records, but this does raise a couple of concerns from my perspective, that if we've paid for something to be done to a standard and the contractor didn't do it, is there any comeback? Obviously we want it fixed, but there's one or two questions there as to why we didn't get what we paid for.
Could somebody tell me what IL4 actually says about what should be there?
Mr. Chair, it's a sort of measure for the importance level of the building. So you could regard it as a sort of a code for its resilience to a seismic event. So 4 is the highest level. An IL1 would be probably a house. So given the emergency management operates out of that building, we would expect it to withstand a reasonable shake and to be fit for purpose. What the report is highlighting is that there are issues, as Chair Nichols pointed out, there are issues potentially in how it was actually installed, but there are also issues of ongoing maintenance which appear not to have been done.
Right, so where do we take this from here? Is this, you're asking, we need to see the maintenance that's already been done, because I know that there was a lot of upgrade done to that building when it was first installed out back there. And what needs to be done to bring it up to the IL4, importance level 4 standards? And where does that money come from? Which budget does that come from?
So just through you, in my report to you from KEG, I'm just indicating that the KEG has resolved to explore future options, but that they aren't at the exclusion of doing the work that needs to be done immediately.
Right.
On top of that, we are requesting a breakdown of the costs that have been spent on the building in the past. And so given that the shared service is hosted by Environment Southland, it'll be going back to the Environment Southland financial team to provide those details.
Okay.
So I'm just reporting that that's what KEG has done.
Right, thank you. So in terms of actually making it happen, the managers will take it up with the chief executive of Environment Southland, get that information. All right. Yes, Scott.
Thank you. I've got questions on it, but are they best left to the actual part of the report to talk about the building, or are we going to address that building part now? And
Well, it is
coming
relevant.
up?
I see there is a building report.
So are we going to address that? Because I can talk about it there or now, but
You probably should, so we have some continuity.
talk about it now.
Yes.
Well, just I guess supporting what the chair of KEG has said about getting that accountability for those costs, but just echoing the sentiments of Chair Horrell around the accountability. I mean, this building is old. It's not from the 60s. It's from 2010. There would have been a building certificate issued at the time, which would have been up to IL4 at the time. So I would be really concerned about throwing more money into this when something should have been done back then in recent time. So I want some accountability in terms of who signed it off, how it got signed off, how things haven't been done, and the maintenance and cost of those maintenance as well. I wasn't impressed with what I saw here in terms of a relatively new building.
So if I may through you.
Yes.
So just to address some of those concerns, we have started to explore the insurance options and what that could potentially look like. Because it is outside of that 10-year period, it's not likely that we'll be able to utilise the insurance that we currently have to do that remediation work. However, we are still in the process of exploring that as an option.
Will insurance pay out if it's not up to standard, but it hasn't been actually damaged?
Well, the question that I'd ask, that I'm asking if I was in the insurance industry or as a governor of this, is what maintenance has been done over the last 15 years as well to even identify the loose tie rods and all of that, because I imagine there needs to be some kind of checking on the actual, given the importance of that building being up to code all the time.
I would surmise it was signed off when it was placed on the site and occupied, but what's happened since then?
Notwithstanding the physical issues, have the standards changed since 2010? Because it's possible that much of it complied then, but I think just in terms of the facts, are the standards now the same as what they were when it was built?
I think if it's saying like the media boom support structure was installed incorrectly, I mean, that's not a standards thing, that's an actual physical doing the job wrong.
There's not a danger to life in London, I see from the papers at the present time.
But there's an
It's not like a
accountability
brick building
piece.
that's going to fall down.
Yeah, but there's the money that needs to be spent remediating this, given that there's been funding go towards the building over the last 15 years, but also what was done when it was shifted there on site that potentially wasn't done properly at the time.
Well, Mrs. Kubrick is here and
through
acting
you,
for
Chair.
chief executive at the moment.
Yes, and also chair of the operational subcommittee who had this conversation with the manager as well. And at the time we discussed the report, we suggested that we go back through the archives to actually find out, to your point, Mia, that we work out how it was actually signed off in the first place and check through the paperwork for that, acknowledging the need to make sure that the Chair of KEG's point that the immediate work is done to correct matters there with a view to be able to inform how we move forwards from here, what the appropriate solution is, but making sure that we cover off all those bases. I can't cite chapter and verse, but I have a funny feeling that standards may have changed, and that may have been the thing that precipitated the review of the IL4 nature of the building, the compliance of the building with the IL4 standards. I couldn't say that chapter and verse. I'd have to go back and check what the former interim manager did.
Right. Christine?
I just wonder if the current assessor is able to advise the elements in his report or her report that would comprise new requirements since 2010. That would probably be a straightforward way of doing it. So the recommendations which are due to changes in legislation since that time and which are due to inadequate.
Additional ones, yes. Right, that will happen, yes.
So just a further point, and it's not really related to this, but I did touch on it at the last meeting as well, in terms of how this whole EMS thing is structured. Like in this report so far, we've talked about the KEG group, the operational subcommittee, and us, and I assume Ellie and her team as well, are talking about exactly the same report. We're almost quadruple handling something here. I just highlighting again, I think we need to have a good look at how we're actually overseeing all of this in terms of who wears what hat and where we all are. It's quite confusing. And I think for the team doing the work, it's probably a lot of triple handling, quadruple handling going on as well. So just a point.
I think you're right. I think we created it so we can change it to fit whatever model we want. So if you want to have that would be a separate discussion, would it?
Yeah, I did raise it last time as well. The same kind of.
Yeah, well, the foundations were, we have a joint organisation with joint funding and responsibilities, etc. If that needs to be reviewed, then it can be done. Like it's our organisation, we can do whatever we want.
Well, I'd suggest that we do that because I think it would be helpful for everybody.
All right, so how do we commission a review of? Amy, did you have?
I was going to say through you, Chair, I just wondered if there was an opportunity because the structure's itemised through the back of the group plan. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, and I see that Jim's due to speak to the committee as well, to put that to him as part of when he comes online to talk.
Thank you. Organisational development, I note in that report, on the next page, increasing staffing from 7 to 11.
There's a separate report about that later on in the agenda. So,
Right.
as I said before, KEG has received those reports and passed them through to the group for consideration.
Thank you.
We're recognising the role of KEG, recognising the role of group, and recognising the shared service structure that we have here in Southland. The request in effect for more staff and more resources will probably lead to a conversation around structure and financing and effectiveness.
Okay. Are there any other matters from your report that you wanted to promote at the moment? Okay. So the recommendation is that we receive the report from the coordinating executive group chair. From the chair that we received that report. Mayor Scott, thank you. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? 6.2 is the group plan update.
Just before we leave that item, what is Plan B in the event of a major catastrophe, what's the plan?
In regards to the Emergency Coordination Centre,
Yes, so if it's not available to be used, what's the alternative?
we have an MOU signed with Transport World, and we can requisite their facility and work out of there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So in regards to the group plan,
Yes,
so Jim has an apology, he couldn't make it today, so I am more than happy to speak to it.
good, thank you.
So with the group plan, we are on track. We have decided to take since I've come into the role, a bit of a different direction with it, recognising that this is the future of Southland and it is the future of emergency management in our region. We have taken the approach to align the group plan with the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, which is currently the most up-to-date piece of doctrine that we have in Aotearoa, New Zealand, especially considering that we are going through the emergency management bill process at the moment, and that our current director's guidelines as well as our current legislation is maybe not as fit for purpose as it has been previously. However, the National Disaster Resilience Strategy is in line with the Sendai framework, and that is in effect until essentially 2029, 2030. With that, it will mean that we'll have a bit more of a community focus within our group plan. It will also mean that we'll be weaving through iwi and mana whenua a lot more in with it, and we are hoping to have the draft out for review within the next month or so. So we'll be able to give you a bit more of an update then, and you'll be able to come back with some of your feedback on that as well.
Do we have questions or commentary about Emily's report?
So just picking up Ms. Scott's point about being able to facilitate conversation about structures and streamlining those, how do we weave that into this process?
And this may be something that someone would like to speak to, but I can talk to it first, and that is around within the legislation, we do have a set structure from a governance perspective, an operational perspective, and the delivery perspective. So I think with what I've seen so far in my 6 months in this role is maybe it's just more a bit about clarification of roles itself, and that's certainly something that we can highlight in the group plan, as well as from an emergency or from the manager's perspective, is we can actually do a bit more work, such as a workshop around the roles and responsibilities, and also the hierarchical structure and how that weaves through into the actual delivery itself.
Yes.
So is a group plan a living document, or is it something quite like the long-term plans where every 3 years, is it something that we can, and how difficult is it to kind of keep it as a living document and make changes as you go?
So with the current legislation, every time there's an update to it, it does need to go through a consultation process. However, it is a conversation that Jim and I are having at the moment about creating a living document around it, however, still having the time frame of, for example, the 2030 timeframe when we need to completely review it and update it. And it's just really about a discussion of the logistics on how that would potentially look, as well as any changes that may occur in the emergency management bill. And it's certainly something that we as group managers have taken to them around having something that's a little more fit for purpose for the 21st century.
Just in relation to the completion of a group plan, is there an anticipated date for that, and would there be a workshop prior to that, as opposed to making an earlier meeting for us to discuss it? The workshop sounds like a positive idea.
Yeah, we'd very much like that, and so thank you for bringing that up. We would really like to do a workshop around that, and we can certainly incorporate a bit more around roles and responsibilities as well. As for a timeline, it's something that we discussed last week at the coordinating executive group meeting, particularly around the local body elections and whether that should have an influence or not with that. So it's a conversation that I'll be having with Jim in the coming weeks around what that could potentially look like, and we'll be creating a timeline on the expectations as well as when the drafts should come out, and then as well as dates that could potentially occur for workshops, given that Jim is also writing a number of other group plans at the moment, and we can socialise that, come up with a complete date, and then we can certainly socialise that with the group.
Thank you. Was there an expected date, or
There
was just
was,
in
I
the-
think the expected date was potentially August. However, I've come into the role and have decided that we probably need to look at something a little more for the purpose.
Okay. Unless there's any further discussion, the recommendation is that we receive the verbal update from our manager. Scott, thank you. I'll second that. Mayor Bell, welcome.
Thank you.
We recorded you as being slightly late, so it's all
Apologies for lateness.
right. No, that's all right. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Thank you. Thanks, Ellie. Now you're going to give us your report, EMS Manager's report.
I hope that you're all not bored of my voice by being with listening to. So yes, in regards to the Emergency Management Southland Manager's report, I've currently been in the role 6 months now, so well and truly have my feet under the table. We have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes with the team to move forward and to come up with a bit more of a plan of what we're going to be doing over the next 5 years, as well as annually as well. We have taken the Natural Disaster Resilience Strategy, and we've just developed a work plan as a group, as a team, on what that's going to look like next year, and that is currently ready to go and will be incorporated into the business plan, which will be presented at the next meeting. The whole team has had input into that, and so we all have buy-in and an understanding of our direction for the future. As well as that, we've done internal regrouping as well. We've moved some of our staff into positions that are potentially better suited, and as a result, we have employed 2 new staff members. I'd like to introduce you to Corey down the back there. So Corey is our new administration assistant, and she has come from Southland District Council. Again, sorry, Scott and Cameron. Stolen. So got a great asset in Corey there. We've also just employed a new emergency management advisor who will be starting on the 3rd of June. Thank you. And her name is Maddie. She comes from a surf life saving New Zealand background. She is also got a bachelor's degree in geography with a minor in environmental studies. So she's the last piece of the puzzle for our team, and we're really looking forward to the next financial year and rolling out some of our engagement activities. Part of what I've done as the new manager is created weekly staff trainings, and that is particularly around some of those immediate actions in response. So as well as going through our standard operating procedures for various events, we are also upskilling in the likes of initial action plans, holistic consequence analysis, community impact assessments, and basically anything that comes up. For example, the EM bill submissions as well. We've also been quite heavily involved in the emergency management bill and the MSIP program. We've done a number of workshops, and thank you to Cameron and to Debbie from GDC for coming along to Wellington and participating and providing some really good feedback from a local level to the National Emergency Management Agency on the regional rural perspective, which I think is something that really needs to be heard in Wellington. So all in all, we've been doing quite a bit around community engagement as well, and when Janine speaks to her report, you'll see that we have reinvigorated the community emergency hub program as well as the community response plans, and we have a number of them that should be updated by the end of this month, and a number in the pipeline with the beginnings of the engagement activities that we wish to undertake with some of those communities. And that is my report. Open to questions.
Thank you, Ellie. Christine?
So this will be the first time for some time that you've appointed to all vacancies and are now fully staffed. Yeah, so that will make it slightly easier.
What's the role of the emergency management advisor?
They are great all-rounder.
Right.
So with our emergency management advisors, we've essentially divvied up the region into 3. And this particular advisor will be looking after the Matilda, Waikaia catchments. And of course, we all know that that's a lot of work because there's a lot of our communities that live and play along the Matilda catchment. Because her thesis was in the Tairi floodplains, she's more than well versed in the flood implications of the Matilda as well.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or commentary from the manager's report? Yes, Scott.
Just a comment saying thank you. 6 months, a lot of work. You certainly got your feet under the table, so yeah, thanks.
Yes. Right. The recommendation is we receive this the verbal report. Move it for that. Sorry. Yes, Scott. You, Bill. All those in favour, please say aye, and thank you. The operations report from Janine. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you. So hopefully you've had a chance to read through the report, and I'll just touch up on a few things. As Ellie had mentioned, with our community engagement, we've had some really good uptake and some really positive feedback and some workshops. There are 4 plans that will definitely be finished in the next week or 2 that are out. We're working through our next lot of plans, those that have higher risk and hazard within their region. So working through with Tuatapi, Matauda and various other communities like that. So we're starting with those that have had the oldest plans, working through those. We have Janelle's over on Stewart Island next week with the Reki Ora plan, working with that and meeting with community. We've had a lot of public engagement that we've been undertaking with our AMP shows, our Marahiku Marae working alongside with Ange, multicultural. Today we're at a care expo for disability and older people. Tomorrow we're at the block with our younger people, trying to capture our youth as well. We're starting with community board meetings, sitting on those as well, and encouraging some of our community boards to be involved with our community response planning. So a lot in the space of our reduction and our readiness. The welfare coordination group, so we have worked through our terms of reference, and our next action plan is to work through a plan for 25-26. And we have incorporated a lot of other stakeholder partners within our sub-function groups and getting those up and going again as well, and working alongside Angie there and our Runaka as well. And then the training is also, so we've had a really good uptake when a form was put out. I think Tracy mentioned that last time, around those that are ready that can stand up straight away and come in under a number 1 level shift. And we've had 70 people selected that, which is really much appreciated from the council staff. And our next steps in the training progressing their training so that they're at the highest possible level. So we're working with P&C on each of the councils to push through. We've got some function training coming up in June and August as well, and looking for those function leads for those. Ali mentioned our new staff, so it'll be really great to have a full team again. And just that the quarter has been a really, really busy quarter with a lot of engagement, which has been really, really good. And even today at the expo, we've already got another 2 or 3 agencies that would like to engage with us, which is really great. So thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Janine. Just say, I went to the AFAT Roadshow meeting and the Working Men's Club, and the room was full. We had to bring in extra chairs. A really receptive audience and lots of discussion and conversation afterwards. Pleasing to see. So there's a number of things that Janine has mentioned. Does anyone wish to ask questions or provide commentary? Extensive training program.
Just recognising I've seen everywhere I've been, you've been, so you've certainly been out and about in the traps here, there and everywhere. So yeah,
I suppose we wonder how things all come together and how our staff know what to do in particular areas. So interesting to hear that training program. Right. Christine.
Right, thank you. I just note your connection in with the community boards as well, and you've undertaken some community response plan. Are the community boards part of that meeting as well? So you're not going and doing it twice, but they are.
We've done a separate meeting with some of the community boards around their responsibilities as well from a governance level, and we've encouraged them to come along if they'd like to join the response groups as well, to be part of that community. So yes, yeah. So there has been.
Yeah. Okay, that's good, thank you.
Thank you. Unless there's any further discussion, the recommendations that we received the report. I will move that from the chair that we received report with thanks, Janine.
Thank you, and I'll excuse myself and head
Seconded by
back to
Mayor Bell. Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. And welcome to Corrie Butler. Southland earthquake and tsunami event report. Ellie, you're on again.
Excellent. Thank you. So on March the 25th, we had a minor seismic adjustment. I'm sure all of you would have felt that earthquake, considering it was quite a large one. And I would like to point your attention to the pictures up here. So when we talk about long or strong, particularly in our coastal areas, this is what we're talking about. So if you take a look at that figure on the left-hand side, it shows that that shaking lasted from 1 minute 43 seconds to 4 minutes and 20 seconds. So that's a long earthquake. Depending on where in Southland you were would depend on what type of shaking you felt with it. The Riverton community particularly, they felt that earthquake. They recognised that it was a long earthquake and they self-evacuated, the schools did. Of course, it occurred at one of the more inconvenient times right on school pickup, so that created a few complications. However, we really want to iterate to that community that they did the right thing. We have since met with all of the schools in the area, and we've had a bit of a debrief around that particular earthquake and the tsunami that was associated with it. Really want to highlight that even though the tsunami wasn't a big event, we still had a tsunami associated with it. Had that earthquake been a thrust earthquake, we would have seen a lot larger displacement of water, and so therefore the consequences would have been a lot more severe. So even though we refer to, yes, it was a large earthquake, it was 6.9, we didn't have a tsunami, but we had a tsunami, or we call it a baby tsunami. It was still an earthquake and a tsunami in the Pusiga Trench. So we have fortunately been able to leverage that and bring in a bit of interest from some of the universities, and we are talking to some of those universities around the potential of coming down and supporting them where we can in further studies of the Pusiga Trench. With the response itself, because the earthquake lasted for quite some time, our team naturally drop cover hold, and as soon as that shaking stopped, they immediately kicked into gear for a response based on our tsunami SOP. And again, this comes back to the training that we were doing. That month was our tsunami SOP training, and so it was quite fitting that this event was to kick off. And kudos to the team. I was actually in Riverton at the time, and I got a phone call within maybe actually it was during the earthquake, saying, oh, we've got an earthquake, this is an event, and immediately activated the SOP. We set up an emergency mobile alert to evacuate now, and within 10 minutes we had the system set up. We had the EMA ready to go, and fortunately we got a message from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Centre saying that there was no tsunami threat. So we immediately took the actions within our SOP to essentially wait for NEMA's response, because we need to go through the official channels before we can communicate that with our communities, as well as field a lot of that information and disseminate a lot of information around our social media, our website, and the actual response itself. So the team did a fantastic job at springing into action very, very quickly and appropriately, following those SOPs. And then eventually we did have an EMA emergency mobile alert was sent out by the National Emergency Management Agency to say stand down. So it was certainly a lot of lessons were identified in that response, particularly our relationship between the National Emergency Management Agency, GNS Science, and the way that messaging comes out. We do really want to emphasise that in an event like this, there's not enough time to get emergency mobile alert out. If you look at the tsunami expert panel, it takes them about 40 minutes to convene. If we have a Pusaga Trench tsunami, it normally takes about anywhere between 35 to 45 minutes for that to reach our shores. There is not enough time for us to get that messaging out. So that long or strong message is really, really important for us. And it's something that we're planning on doing a lot more comms about. We also have the emergency mobile alert test occurring this Sunday. So we're leveraging off that. So the following week, we'll be doing a lot more around the expectations in Southland on those emergency mobile alerts, because the reality is we can't rely on them. We really need our communities to understand that if you feel an earthquake that's long, it's longer than a minute, if it's strong enough to knock you off your feet, you need to evacuate and get yourself as far inland as possible. And we are working through some of those next steps, as you will see on page 23, around the actions. And they are on track and will be completed by June.
Positive. Thank you. Just a couple of comments. We, Chairman Horrell might relate, we were sitting here in a meeting when that earthquake occurred, and the whole room was just, it went on for some time, and we were thinking, do we dive under the table or not? I think if it got more intense, we might have done that. Yes. I noticed the Chinese government are doing surveys down at Pusaga Trench. They've had one of their oceanographic survey vessels down there just recently.
I was not aware of that.
It was I read in the news somewhere, stuff. And there's a tsunami handbook that's come out from National Office, NEMA. Does that change anything that we're doing currently?
Mainly around the messaging that there was just about if it's close, if you feel an earthquake close to the coast, it's likely to be a local source tsunami. So that messaging of if it's strong, get gone is what we're pushing. Yeah.
Personally, I still think the sirens are a good idea, but they're not used anymore. Is that correct?
We've never had sirens in Southland.
What we have in the past.
It was based on the FEN sirens.
Oh, yes. Right, it's true, it was, yes.
Yeah, but
So not specifically for tsunamis, no, we used ones already there. Chairman Horrell.
Yeah, just a couple of concerns. Not everybody knows when that thing goes up on their phone what it is, and I guess we've got a wee bit of work to do there yet. And that earthquake the other day, it was long, and I was contemplating, do I get under the Slinsby table and leave or get up again? If it got stronger, we would have moved. But yeah, the firm reactions, I was looking at the door and thinking, well, that's an escape method, or should we just be under the table? So I think there's probably a wee bit of work to do in the space, because, you know, and also it appeared that stand down from the Pacific thing was probably premature and didn't probably help the response. It's just a few things to perhaps be able to try it out for a bigger one.
So the Pacific Tsunami Warning Centre isn't New Zealand's.
Hawaii isn't.
No, it's in Hawaii, but it's not our main means of alerting. It's done through, like we said, the tsunami expert panel, which is based in Wellington.
Ms. Scott?
Do you think there's a bit of a risk of complacency based on what we've just had? Because I know a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, tsunami, it didn't really, and because it didn't actually happen and it was a baby tsunami, because the alert kind of, you almost end up at that boiler point roof scenario when you get the big alert on your phone and then everyone goes, oh, yeah, there's another alert, another tsunami, ha, ha, ha. But yeah, I think the sentiment I kind of have out there is people don't realise how lucky we were that there wasn't one. And just to comment on the phone thing as well, if you don't read it properly when it comes up, it disappears and you can't go and read what it says. So the keywords at the start of the message that are the first ones that you see are quite important, I think, in terms of getting that message across, because once it's gone and you can't pull it back.
So it's not actually gone. It's sitting in your emergency messages under your settings in your phone. So if you go into settings and then emergency messages, you can actually pull them up and you'll actually pull up all of your previous emergency management alerts. And that, however, thank you for bringing that up, because we will be ensuring that next week we've got a series of Facebook posts that will be going out, and we'll be explaining that, because we already foresee that that's going to be one of the some of the feedback that we're going to get, and so we actually have a Facebook post that's going to be dedicated to that.
Cool. Thank you.
Also, in regards to the EMA, just want to clarify that this event was quite unique, and because from the perspective of a response, it was the first time that the MAR has really stood up as they are currently the transitions from the regional emergency management advisors to the monitoring and reporting system. An EMA wouldn't have been sent out by the National Emergency Management Agency for a stand down. So that wouldn't have happened usually, and that's not part of the SOP. So again, that's something that we're working with the National Emergency Management Agency on, and ensuring that our SOPs are aligned with their SOPs and the expectations around it. And then the next steps, of course, will be educating the community so that they understand not to rely on an emergency mobile alert.
And just relate that during my times around Southland, there's been a 7.7 and an 8.2 down in Pusica. So, and this is just the latest one, and an 8 over in Doubtful Sound. Was it Doubtful Sound?
7.9.
7.9, that's near enough to an 8 for me if I was with. So, yeah, it's going to happen again, and it's not unlikely. So be prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have any further questions or?
No, it was just a comment really. I think it's certainly good to have the practice alerts coming out, so we kind of know what that's. I was interested in the, because it's also on social media to warn people that this is coming up. I don't know, was it the one that came out from the police that I read, and it was advising that if you have a hidden phone somewhere and indicating you don't want somebody else to know you've got it, the advice is to go and put that on silent, you know, for the 2 hours before and after. It never crossed my mind.
I can think of one place where that might be appropriate, just down the road here.
Okay.
All right, so thank you, Ali. If there are any more questions or commentary? If not, the recommendation is we receive the report from the manager. Moved by Mabel, your turn. Thank you. Seconded. I'll second it. All those in favour? Thank you, Ali. Finance report. Well, it says Tanya, but Tanya's not here, so is that from you?
I can give it a go.
Right.
So you will note in the finance report, and I'm sure you've got a lot of questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. I am working a lot closer with the Environment Southland finance team. Unfortunately, they've got a lot of illness in their team at the moment, so they haven't been able to come to the meeting today to answer some of your questions. So if we take a look at page 27, you will notice that there are some surplus, and a lot of that's around the welfare costs and the reimbursements from Blue Cliff's emergency response. You'll also see that we do have some surplus in regards to our operating costs in general. and that's probably more on page 28. A lot of that is because we haven't completed the vulnerability study. There's money set aside for that. The reason that vulnerability study hasn't gone ahead is because we haven't had the staff to be able to continue that project. We also don't have the modelling that we need for it, so we really need the modelling before we go and do a vulnerability study for our lifeline utilities, because once we do the modelling, we're going to have to redo it anyway. We also have not rolled out the D48 incident management software, and we have not rolled out the Starlink program that Douglas had.
It was a total of 4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, that's due to our staffing requirements. So we do have a slight surplus of operating costs this year, and we'll be looking at utilising that towards some of our tsunami modelling. So happy to take questions, and I'll do my best to answer where I can.
Thank you, Ellie. Christine?
Thank you. Does the maintenance of the building sit under other operating costs, or is that a separate line?
I'm not too sure on that one.
Connection to find out.
Yes, I imagine it'll come up when you're tracking back to find that, and maybe it's suitable to have as a separate line. Thank you.
Well, this will be the first time since the building was installed that we've actually had a proper look at it.
Yes, but it's whether there is a annual maintenance
Yes.
fund sitting in there that enables the work to be done, or it was never sitting there as a separate line item.
Oh, and I would just like to include that as of the next financial year, we will be removing AF8 from the Emergency Management Southland finances and having that separate. So that will hopefully alleviate a lot of confusion around some of our surplus as well.
So does the staffing relate into that as well? So is there a staffing component for the AF8 that will be removed from these figures as well as just the line item?
Potentially, I probably couldn't answer that at the moment, but I can find out.
Well, my understanding, because I've asked that question as well, AF8's a separate organisation which is allied to Environment Southland,
Yes.
also involved down to Emergency Management Southland. And the administration part and the finances are dealt with from our office across the back here.
Just
So I
whether it's
think,
staffing.
the chief executive told me that she wants to see it separated
Right.
so that it's clear.
Yes, then just isolating the staffing component. Thank you.
Yeah, so it does have a separate budget,
Yes.
AF8, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Just a question on the staff cost. You mentioned before that you've got a full contingent now, so you've got those 2 additional labour units. So were they in the budget? So that 835,421, is that going to be impacted at all by the 2 staff that you've got on there, or has that been budgeted for and is basically been sitting in reserve until those staff have been on board? Because obviously there'd be a bit of a surplus there when they weren't paid, or there's an additional amount needed to cover the costs.
It has been budgeted, because we did go through that to ensure that we had what we needed for the next financial year. Previously, Douglas had budgeted for another FTE. However, when I went through the operating costs and what we currently have in place, I couldn't see any surplus for that particular role. So it's something that we've got the finance team going back just to reassess to find out where that had come from and what the thought pattern was for the future and the longevity of that particular role.
Yeah, because I'd imagine there'd be some kind of a reserve built up because you've been under capacity for some time.
However, we have had people contracted into these roles, which costs a lot more than what a regular FTE would be.
Which leads into my next question around the contract labour. So with those roles being filled, do you expect that to drop, or is it a separate line?
I hope so.
So the budget could change in terms, or are those, yeah, cool.
Yes, so I'll be with the end of the financial year working with the finance team to just ensure that our forecasting is correct and it has actually matched the actuals in the year to date.
Thank you, because the staff costs in there don't indicate there's been any vacancies during the year, and would suggest an additional 120,000 is it for the contract labour, so the figures don't quite add up. Yeah, thank you.
And I guess in terms of the depreciation, does that include the building depreciation as well? And if so, where's the depreciation sitting?
It ties into my question from last meeting.
I think the staff have just appreciated too much, haven't we? Must be the building.
Well, it's the other assets.
And you'd expect over 4 years for depreciation to be going up if the values are going up. Or,
When Tanya speak, you have to talk to her and clarify that and perhaps email it out so that we understand. You have to ask it next time. Thank you. Right, so that's the financial report and the recommendation as we receive it. Is there any further discussion or commentary about it?
could we add a motion in there that we actually get further information at our next meeting? So we're not just receiving it, we're actually getting that breakdown of the costs that we've asked for.
Before the next meeting or?
I just suggest to her that she find those answers now and get them out before the meeting.
Or, you know, I don't mind when, but just, yeah, if we've got a time frame on there that we are going to get them.
Well, yeah, just to my mind, it's better to get the information out while the questions are fresh. And then next time we have an understanding. And none of it's difficult. I'm sure the financial officers will be able to give the answers to those questions. Right, so the motion to receive the report. Scott, thank you. There you go. Thank you. Seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you, Ellie. So we have the EMS building IL4 review and code group report, which we talked about earlier. It's got the details of the structural issues. So what discussion do you want to have now? Ellie's, are you going to make it, present that?
I think.
Or did we cover it?
I think we've covered it.
Do you think we covered it? Do you want some more effort?
Just a question around where the funding comes from, because it sort of ties back to previous discussions. If there's been money going in under the environment health and support costs, and there's a budget in there, or it's going to be additional. Yeah, so I'd like to query whether the cost of the work comes in.
Okay, well, that's another question that can be answered when we see out the financial stuff.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Evelyn.
I think, plus I appreciate the fact that we've dealt with the problems with the existing building, and Ali has identified a potential bug out space, so to speak. I think the other discussion that does need to start though is about the potential for a joint emergency response hub and where that sits, and that there's a place here for the mayors, particularly mayors and chairs, to start their part of that discussion, because that's going to need a much bigger conversation, and it's not just with St John's and the fire service, and it really is a big community discussion that needs to happen. So I would really hate us not to start it today, because it kicks it further down the road.
Do we know where St John's and fire are? Because I know they've been having discussions for years about, actually, I mean, they're combined at the moment in Invercargill, but they're both outgrowing their buildings, so they're still looking at doing
They're
something.
going through a separation, the way I put it at the moment. And St John's are going to create their own site again.
Because it would make a lot of sense to everyone's point if St John's and the ambulance, and the fire were looking at doing something together to actually do it. But coming from experience in Lumsden, where we've got that multifaceted emergency centre there with all three emergency services at one site, that's got so many advantages from a cost point of view, if nothing else, but from an emergency resilience point of view too, you've got that one sort of point of contact.
Well, as the person who actually helped put that together, I say, you're right. And if you remember, the ambulance services used to work from the hospital. They reduced their average response time for about 4 minutes by moving into town. Again, which I was in a position at that time to encourage police, fire and ambulance all to be in one precinct, but that is now, ambulance are doing their own thing and fire won't be going with them.
So do we have
As I understand it peripherally, I'm not involved in it now.
But to Evelyn's point, do we have a role, even politically, to actually have a discussion with them to encourage them to maybe look wider? And if there's another party coming into the mix with emergency management to come in, then you actually get quite a cool setup.
Well, the one in Christchurch is great. We could have someone. Possibly they can be encouraged to work together, but I believe that St John have actually made up their mind about what they're going to do, and they're looking at the funding of it. So who would talk to them and do the encouragement? You would be? Lifeline's discussion?
Yeah, if I can speak to that just for a moment.
You may know more than I do.
Have been in discussions with police and FENS informally, and have touched with St John's as well, and which is why we've presented option 3 in the recommendations, and that is because they have recognised that they have outgrown their current facilities, and looking at some of the models that have occurred across the country, there is potential, and they would be in support of at least exploring a viable option and what that could potentially look like. And I think it would probably be guys.
Well, timing would be important if one of them moves out now and creates a new facility before the others are ready to actually take some action. So you're going to talk further about that?
I can do.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Mayor Scott. I think it's a good suggestion. So that's option 3. Evelyn favours?
Just before you go there, Mr Chair, I'm just looking at the key findings here. It would be good to know if there was any contingent liability to the job that was done. Has the code changed significantly? Is there an annual maintenance plan? They say the nuts shouldn't be tight. So is wind enough that you're going to have looser nuts? In the short term, we've got this building and other changes might come, but there's some questions that I think we need to have answered before we look at them. A lot of those other options are actually, there's more than one that's probably valid, like what's feasibility study on where we are at the ability to have a joint facility somewhere. But I guess this place is outside the known flood zone, and it's got a building that is supposed to be able to handle an earthquake. So it would depend on where they decide to build, actually. And we know that a lot of, in most emergencies, a lot of the stuff's going to be outside in the cargo. So there's a whole lot of factors I think that need to be considered.
Perhaps option 1 would lead to option 4, wouldn't it? Decision about option 4. Kim, shaking your head. Option 1, doing a survey to determine the actual risk in the structure.
So you mean option 3 or 4?
4, accept the risks and maintain the status quo.
Keg wasn't keen on that because of the fact that we are very fond of we're very fond of the staff that work out of that building. Look, I think Evelyn was trying to make the point that in the longer term, it would be good not to lose sight of a combined precinct. And if you think about the learnings of AF8 and the implications for the South Island, Invercargill and Dunedin are the 2 cities that are the least affected by the immediate shake, and it's inevitable that the response will end up coming out to the lower South Island through Invercargill and Dunedin. So there is, I think, a role also for NEMA in looking at the longer term. So we just did not want, from a key point of view, we didn't want the 2 options to miss the significance of doing the work now that can be done. That's the point that we were trying to make.
Thank you.
Both of those, both 1 and 3 are viable options. 4 is not viable. But actually, to come across to Keith's point, actually Plan B is do what you can do immediately, as well as having an alternative location to go to in an emergency. So we were just saying actually waiting isn't an option. While investigations are going on, that's not an option. There's some stuff that can get done. That's the point.
Thank you, that's clear. Christine, your hand is up.
Yes, so just respect option 1, which I think was that recommended. So there's not a costing, obviously, yet around a detailed feasibility study and where that funding would come from. So there's I think reserve funding in there, but it would be useful to know, and that's on remediating the existing building, which is what you're referring to while the longer term option is explored. Remediating as opposed to just fixing immediate things.
Yeah, if I could just draw the distinction. So the option 1 involves geotech work and quite a lot more extensive investigations, which we were led to understand at the KEG meeting. Environment Southland is planning to do those anyway while they evaluate the viability of this building. So it was as part of that, not something specifically that EMS was meant to be funding. There are issues in the report related to the foundations. What we were trying to say is there's some other things though in terms of loose fastenings and things that could be done immediately without triggering seismic investigations and things. How about getting on with those? We're not entirely clear what option 1 means with respect to Environment Southland's alternative building project. And they were outside the scope of the report that came to us, but it was alluded to as part of it, was basically saying Environment Southland doing this anyway. So they can pick up some of that seismic stuff on the way back.
Yeah, I understand where you're undertaking.
Okay, thank you. Clarifies that. Steve?
Perhaps we need confirmation that that is the case and will be picked up as part of that work from Environment Southland.
Sure, get clarification on that.
Thank you.
Yes, Michael.
Through Chair, I'm happy to work with Environment Southland on that because we're actually actively engaged with them from an ICC point of view at the same time. So I'll make sure it's at the governance board that we've got as a shared group.
Thank you.
It sort of appears that to me that none of the options are actually perfect. Well, I think what basically hearing around the table is there's minimal cost of maintaining the structure in the meantime. We should be doing that. We've got a plan B lined up should we need it. And if a joint option comes along, we will look at it. So it's sort of not just one option. I'm saying 4's out, but it's sort of a combination of those others. What I'm hearing is that at the moment it's pretty much the things there look reasonably minor to me, but we need answers to that. You've already got the transport route lined up. If something came up and this wasn't immediately a viable option, but also that if a joint thing came up that we're wanting to look at it. Am I capturing that right? And I haven't got any voting.
I think I get the idea that the impression is that option 3 is the favoured option.
What's option 1? And
But we have to lead up. We can't just instantly go into that. We're leading up to it.
the recommendation that we've got here in front of us, I think, covers it. The only amendment that I'd like to make in there is that option 1 is funded out of the existing, already potentially paid for property budgets at ES rather than additional funding. Worded a lot shorter than that, obviously.
You noted that, Amy?
Pardon?
You noted that?
And I'll be happy to move it under that.
So the recommendations are progress option 1 and do the feasibility assessment for remediating the building, while simultaneously investigating option 3, the development of a joint emergency services precinct. Undertake the immediate work that has been identified in the key finding of the report. And 3, for Environment Southland to fund the assessment of that building.
It's like
Out of existing
current budgets, yeah.
Yes, with existing finances. So that's,
I'm happy to move that.
thank you, Mayor Scott. Seconded by Mayor Bell. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Thank you. So, page 61, according to my agenda. Proposal for alternate controller remuneration. Okay.
So just in regards to the alternate controller remuneration, I'm sure you've all read the report already. This has come on the back of a lot of conversation that's happened nationally. I think here in Southland, we really need to recognise the fact that the group manager role and the group controller role are done concurrently. In most other regions in the country, they are separate, recognising that they're two very different skill sets. We are also seeing a lot of burnout with our controllers nationally, and me as a group manager and the group controller, I'm very concerned that with the changes in legislation, with the exposure of some of the liability that's happened with recent events, and the fact that everyone's getting a lot busier, it makes you really, really wonder why someone would want to be an alternate controller. So part of that is I've reached out to some of my colleagues in other districts and other regions, and basically taken their controller remuneration frameworks and butchered it so that it suits the Southland needs. Sorry, when I say butchered, I mean incorporated it with a bit of a Southland flavour. It is also an opportunity to recognise the work that our controllers do and the dedication that they have. It's also an opportunity for professional development for our controllers, and particularly with the new legislation, also understanding that there's an expectation of an uplift across the country with controllers, and so this would be the beginning of an uplift in Southland. Certainly recognise that we have missed the long-term plan for this. We've also missed the annual plan budgets for it, which is why we're proposing this for the future, and this is why we're putting it on the table now, is so that we can have a discussion around it leading into the next long-term plan and the annual plans around it. In the interim, we've recommended that we set up an alternate controller roster, and that the alternate controllers essentially buy into that, with the caveat that we will be putting a bit more of our funding aside from Emergency Management Southland to uplift our controllers to ensure that they meet that minimum standard, and so that we are able to support them and ensure that they are well supported in a response. Also recognising that me as the group controller, I'm on call 24/7. So whenever things go bump in the night, it will go through obviously my duty officer, but I'm the one that ends up fielding a lot of those calls, and it's not sustainable, particularly considering we're seeing a lot more of these weather events, severe weather events, but also recognising that across the country, we are here to support our colleagues in other regions. And so with the increase in a lot of these events, we're seeing a lot more burnout, and I don't want to burn out.
There you go, we're up for discussion. Just Simon, do you have a national view? Can you tell us what's happening in other centres?
Yeah, so Ellie's right, there's a mix across the country of group controls, group managers, and generally it used to be the whole country, all the groups were basically, the group manager was the group controller, but now there's a mix. So basically, if you look at Southland, Otago and Canterbury and the South Island, they have got the group controller, group manager role. And then in the North Island, it's slightly more different. You've got a group manager who is also a controller, but is not the primary controller. He's an alternate. So it is changing slightly.
Is there a remuneration?
In
separation there?
some cases, some of the groups do remuneration for external ones, like the West Coast. Their main controller doesn't work in a council or is not part of the setting group, actually. So he's remunerated. I think the same is in Taranaki as well. That person's a contractor. So there is some sort of remuneration for those external ones. Yep. And generally what's been happening in the larger centres anyway is there's a duty controller roster. Most of the big centres do have a duty controller roster, so that the main group controller, like Ellie, isn't on 24/7, 365 days a year. They share it out, and there's a remuneration for that roster as well.
Okay. So, you know, there's obvious budget considerations, but I suppose the first decision, do we need to recommend that additional skills and an on-call requirement need to be recognised financially by councils? Then we come back to saying who pays.
I think, as Mr. Chairman, is the first point from health and safety and employment obligations going up. It's not an option. You can't have somebody that's on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without some recourse. So I think that's the first principal decision that all councils need to make.
So what happens at the moment? Because I mean, Ali's got leave, hopefully, that she can take. So 4 weeks a year where we don't have Ali there. So what's the mechanism that we've got at the moment for when Ali does go and let her hair down a little bit?
Well, an alternate is appointed. Replacement.
Yes, so I'll normally put an email out to the alternate controllers and find out who's available, and depending on how long I'm away for. Don't like to have anyone on the roster on call for the entire time, so do like to give them a week at a time, and that's pretty much how it works at the moment. I think a couple of weeks ago I was in Wellington and decided that I needed to really do some of my PhD work, and was able to get Lucy to cover me for 3 days while I completed that work, and knew that I wasn't going to be disturbed during that time if anything happened. So really, really grateful to the alternate controllers who do cover for me from time to time. But again, it would be nice to be able to have a weekend off every now and then.
So getting the additional remuneration on top of the current pay at the moment.
That's the proposal.
Well, historically, it's all been, they just get their current salary or wages, whatever that their local council provides, with no additional payments, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's great.
So how long can we continue to do that? The first question is, do we think there should be some remuneration? And the second question will be, well, who pays it and how much is it going to be and who's going to negotiate that?
Well, I guess the other first question is it already factored into their contracts? I mean, I don't know the details when.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because it may already be provisioned in terms of if Cameron's employing someone. I don't know if you can answer this question, but it fits into the job description that you may end up being an alternate controller, and it factors into the contract at the moment.
Yes, you've got some knowledge of this.
Through you, Chair, with my HR hat on, there's generally an expectation that staff in councils will support civil defence responses, and so the expectation is, send our people off to get training, but it tends not to. You don't tend to typically say to people, we're looking for this role or that role or the next role. You'll get people who emerge as suitable candidates for those sorts of opportunities, and sometimes you might actually recruit someone who's been an alternate controller or have had some other civil defence role somewhere in the past. I can't speak for the other councils, but we don't remunerate specifically for that. It's an expectation that comes with the role and the job description. So with my operational subcommittee hat on, we were in support of recognising what we're asking people to do. Essentially, as alternate controller, you're not on call, and typically when you'd have people in an on-call capacity in other roles, you would be remunerating them for essentially giving up their freedoms, if you like, in order to be able to respond at short notice. So it didn't necessarily seem to be unreasonable to contemplate that. And then the question is, which I think there's, talking to Ali about continuing to shape up the work. If that's agreed, then what mechanism would be appropriate to do that remuneration?
Okay. Working with our volunteers to take on the additional training, but they're providing the organisation with additional skill set. So firstly, do we think they should be remunerated? That's for the councils to
Sorry, I'm not sure that that's a decision that can be made today without further discussion with the chief executives, others. This is not a body that can determine that.
I was hoping a chief executive might put his hand up and tell me. Wonderful.
The resolution, it says to continue to explore it. It wasn't asking for a decision about remuneration here.
So, but I'm just wondering who would make the decision, because there's some options there about who, if you read through the paper, there's some options there about who makes the payments. And whether it would be individual councils, a hybrid model, or just going
Again, I don't think that's a decision that can be made around the table today. I think that's a discussion that the chief executives.
Well, can we pass something back to the chief executives group to explore this and report back to us?
Whereas yourself, Chair, it opens up more than an issue in relation just to the alternative controllers, because you've got all of the council staff currently on civil defence requirements. If you do it through the existing contracts that you currently got it and do as an after-hours allocation or an on-call allowance, you will come under fire from all of the staff that are within the council employment in relation to that all on-call. So you have to look at it from a different mechanism. So we need to go through and explore it, because the options are not as easy as we would like in relation to the employment arrangement. So we need to explore it as a
Well, I appreciate it's not simple. That's why I'm saying, we have to decide whether we think it's a good idea and whether it should be taken further.
But there's also a very operational type discussion for the chief executive. We shouldn't even be really dabbling in that space.
Or can the recommendation be we refer this back to the chief executives to do the exploration of that initiative?
But it's potentially going to depend on each individual council setup as well, because they're all going to be different and different to the setups. And I struggle to see how we can.
And if you have regard to, I guess, the provincial values, across our councils, we have staff who multitask, and they do so willingly, as opposed to other parts of the country where people say that's not my job description. And I think we really need to be looking into the future a little bit, that we can't always rely on the goodwill of staff on issues such as this, particularly with more and more responsibility in their other functions.
Because there's two aspects to this as well. You've got the BAU where you're just kind of on call in case, but you've also got the live incident which changes, and that's currently I guess what Ali's pointing out is the BAU work is getting harder and more, and it concerns me that there's liability aspects up and down the country that's putting people off as well. I mean, there shouldn't be that kind of onorousness, for want of a better word, on someone as a group controller or an acting controller. They should be able to get about the work without that risk of litigation on them. Personally, that's not cool nationally.
So in principle, can we say that we're willing to explore the possibility of additional remuneration?
Mr. Chairman, when I read through the recommendations, it's not actually committing us to anything. I would have thought that's fine. We received the report, we adopt formal controller roster, and you continue to actually explore and refine remuneration options. I would have thought that's giving guidance to CAG to actually come back with it. So we're not making a decision today. We're just basically having a recommendation for them to look at the issue.
the question around that though is it's different councils, like that the remuneration isn't coming from emergency management, it's coming from each of the individual chief executives to do their staff. And I don't think us as a shared service group can dictate to councils. Yeah, I struggle with that part of it.
Well, their option, recommendation 3, does just encourage their exploration. I suppose, in principle, do we support that there should be one? That there should be some remuneration, or that was worth considering?
Again, I don't think it's the role here to do that today. I note there is a decision in 2 to adopt a formal alternative controller duty roster to ensure sustainable work, and you've talked to that. But again, that has implications for our current alternative controllers, I guess. So that's a discussion that needs to occur with individuals.
Is there a further issue though, in terms of where does the role of the alternative controller sit? We heard that some councils actually have a consultant in that role. And I think there's a step that needs to be gone through in terms of, is it a role that should be sitting in the councils themselves?
We do bring people in as consultants to act as controllers.
Well, we did for a
Pay them
while.
appropriately. I'm not sure what level that is.
Gore had one of its second-tier managers leave, who happened to be all the necessary qualifications, and he acted as a consultant for a while until there was a replacement.
Well, so where do we go with this discussion, and what's going to be a resolution?
Well, I struggle with 3 because if I'm just looking at it from a practical point of view, if the alternative controller is still reporting to and acting on behalf of their council that they belong to, so I don't see how we can make a decision here for particular councils unless they are getting paid out of emergency management, which they're not. Although, is that because is there a no, I don't know. I mean, if you're paying them for a live incident, you can pay an additional amount coming out of emergency management to potentially carry the extra load. But from a, I don't know if you can do it from a on-call roster.
If I may just talk to that, because I have been going through it. I was hoping to have a bit more clarification around the potential that EMS could fund this. It would be a very small amount, but it would be the start of an acknowledgement. The second aspect of that would be obviously the second lot of options is how would that actually work? Would it come to obviously the money as a shared service comes to EMS, and then how would we recognise that? Again, discussion for another day, but that's why we've got option 3, the recommendation 3 in there, is to explore this further. It's just I didn't want to bring something to the table with it not having been thought out a little bit. However, I do feel that recommendation 2 needs to be adopted, because the reality is that what I'm doing now is not sustainable, and if I continue on this path, then I'll only be here for probably another 18 months.
I wonder if it's an option to accept 1 and 2 without 3, and within adopting a formal alternative controller duty roster, that will be subject to acceptance of the person within council to undertaking that responsibility. And that would move this on today.
So you're prepared to move 1 and 2?
Probably 4.
Yeah, well, I can move that on what Christine suggested, and yeah, no, I don't think we need to look after Ellie, and what you raised is a very valid point. So I think definitely we need to address that. Yeah, so I'm happy to move 1 and 2.
Could we move 1 and 2 and then advise the manager to further refine the proposal? Just not as a recommendation, but just as advice.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if you need a 4, which would basically say that any financial implications of other councils would have to be discussed and decided before anything changed, because I think the point's been made that 3 does really need to be done, and the concern seems to be about where the money might be coming from, and we're not sure that there's significant money that isn't in the budget. I think, you know, for supporting our staff, we probably need to have 3 in there, but you could have a contingent 4 that no councils are putting their hand up for extra money at this stage. That would be a separate discussion.
I think that overcomplicates it. I'd almost just go back to what Christine said before, and like I think whatever next steps need to come out of too, like if we do too, it'll identify any issues that can then come back, and if we can't get anyone to fill the roster, then.
So Mayor Scott's moved 1 and 2. Do we have a seconder for that?
To keep the meeting moving.
Okay, we're a seconder for that. The really discussion. Further discussion.
Is that enough for staff? I don't want to leave staff high and dry. Is that enough to keep the board moving in the right direction? Because I think there is consensus around the table that remuneration needs to be a factor. It's just the technical part of it that's the issue.
Right. So the recommendations 1 and 2 have been moved and seconded. Unless there's any further discussion, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Carried.
Possible to leave recommendation 3 to lie on the table for further development in the report back.
You need to do that.
But sowing the seeds, it's still there. You haven't withdrawn it. You haven't voted against it. What are you going to do with it? Because it is in the paper.
If it's left on the table, it disappears at the end of our triennial.
We have another meeting before then.
I think we've got 2 CEOs on the room that have heard the discussion. I'm sure they will actively be looking at it. We probably don't need anything formal. They've heard the discussion and that they'll come back, I'm sure. With that.
Yes, I think we've moved 1 and 2, so we don't actually need to take action on 3. Again, you're the expert on procedure.
Well, it has no standing until somebody moves and seconds it anyway, so.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Go for me. Right, the next item on the agenda is the AF8 report. Half-year report, which has been in the papers here. Just ready for information.
And just want to acknowledge the amazing work that Alice Lakehaven does on the AF8 project. She's currently central mentor at the moment, delivering the AF8 Roadshow. I think within the first 2 weeks of this year's AF8 Roadshow, we had already exceeded numbers from the previous years. So it's really a testament, to the work that she does, but also to the appetite of AF8 and the fact that people are still really, really hungry for information around it, as well as acknowledging that the AF8 project, the AF8 program is an anchor point for those cascading and secondary hazards, as well as the emergency preparedness space too. So that's all I really have to say.
In AF8, we have assimilated the administration of that from the beginning. Firstly, because somebody had to, and secondly, because it's to our benefit to have the information from AF8 flowing through here, and including the training program impact directly on the kind of training program we're trying to deliver. So I commend them. But I do have a conflict of interest because I've been part of the AF8 group. But it's really good to see the managers across the whole of mainland New Zealand and South Island cooperating, working together, and they're doing it very effectively. And it doesn't cost us anything additional to do that. So thank you for that update, and I'll move from the chair that we receive the update for AF8. Seconded by Tom. Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. The Mana Whenua Emergency Management Facilitator report with Ange. Thank you, Ange.
Okay, share. So I'll take the report as read on the table, but I'll just highlight some points. So try and point out some of the mahi and collaboration going on across the 4 Rs. So as always, connecting with whānau and community and the wider community in the readiness space has been quite heavy this quarter. And including, like Janine said, really facilitating the east for Emergency Management Southland to front face some of the events and activities happening within our marae, that it's not just through me or anything, that this is a collective community readiness kind of approach, and it's working really, really well. As well as I'll probably point out, I have mentioned Otago Sedum within my report, and that is also just to give confidence around the table that through representing our Papati Pūrunaka ki Marahiku, we obviously have shared interest, and we have takiwā within what would be seen as their area, but what it's actually really doing is supporting the work that's already happening with Ellie and her team across the cross-boundary relationships, especially in catastrophic planning kind of things like that. So just want to point out that I have a presence with the Otago Sedum group as well. As you would see, and I think that's why I wasn't here last meeting, so I attended as part of the IMT for the Awaroa Peninsula fires and subsequent work with that. And probably the other point that I will point out, which is also having communication with different staff across different councils, is really taking my job seriously in regards to the facilitation point of view and connecting dots. So one of the really cool things this quarter that I've seen is being able to point whānau, our marae and rūnaka planning to resources and work already happening within all of your organisations. So, for example, with some of the risk reduction or the risk and LiDAR data and contour availability that's actually out there, that we actually had a lot of whānau even at the marae day, just like, wow, we didn't know this was available for our home. So pointing them in there to avoid duplication of effort. So really proud of that kind of work that I've been doing along with the EMS team. And probably just to not go by without acknowledging it, you will see in my report that I have let you know about some of the effects of the change proposal within Te Reranga or Ngaitahu. So in this pilot so far, the whānau and emergency team is who I've been communicating and coordinating with, but we're just working through the new channels of communication and support, really. So I just wanted to highlight those points, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Anne. We appreciate the supportive work that you're doing. I see that the Minister wants us to have better relationships with Maori, which is a statement they're putting into their changes in legislation. So in one of the seminars, I said, well, what do you actually want? They didn't have an answer to that. They just said they wanted to, this is across New Zealand. So are you, I suppose an open question, are you satisfied with the relationship that we have at the moment with EMS?
Yeah, look, I think this pilot's been a really, I commend everyone around this table and EMS and everybody, Te Reranga o Ngaitahu, who had the vision to actually get some action behind properly intent that exists. So I think this is a great start, part of any pilot, and certainly part of this one. And I'm grateful for, I guess, the experience and background that I was able to bring into the role. There's so much that could be done and so much that could be strengthened that I do believe this is just the start. And I certainly say that to anyone who will listen outside of this takiwā as well, because I think it's important. So, of course, I'm definitely happy with relationships or the willingness to grow those. But been an experience, and mostly positive. And again, acknowledge Ellie and her team. Because this role could easily have been looked at as an additional add-on rather than a key component to bring our shared objectives, which is essentially our community and our whānau wellbeing in any situation, forward. So.
Thank you, Anne. Does anyone, any questions or commentary there? Yes, Christine?
Sorry, just to clarify that you've talked about the restructure position, but there's no impact on the current pilot of that restructure. Is that what you're saying?
They've committed that there's no impact on the pilot. It's just the communication channels and the normal team that I would connect into is gone through that, has been moved through that change proposal. So we're just working through the detail of that. It mainly affects my day-to-day or month-to-month connection, but yeah, the pilot will still be as agreed till the end of January. And I do note in the last meeting I wasn't here that you had made comments or encouraged us all to look at the future, which I believe we've been doing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. We appreciate your support. No questions or further questions or commentary? If not, the recommendation is that we receive the report. I'll remove that from the chair. Do I have a second, please? Bill, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. First report. You were okay, so
So the first report, so this is in regards to the flood impact and risk specialist team. So they've been doing quite a bit of work around impact-based warning systems. So when we're talking about impact-based warning systems, we're not just talking about traditionally the QMEGs that are coming down a river or the river levels, but what does that actually mean to society? For example, a certain amount of QMEGs means that we need to shut the roads around Boundary Creek area. It's going to impact, or it's going to impact the Gore Bridge, the railway bridge, and measure, things that everyday people are able to measure. And as a result of that, a lot of you would have attended workshops over the last couple of months around how we actually deliver that product. As well as the intelligence process and the decision-making frameworks around that as well. So I will take the report as read, and if there are any questions, I can take them back to Joe for clarification. But it is an ongoing project, and there will be updates on this in the future.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or commentary? Would you like to work your way through the graph there on the second page? If not, do we do anything more than receive the report and endorse the coordinating executive group review? Do we provide feedback on the report today?
Just a comment, and it may or may not be related to this, but just going back to the state of emergency flood that we had in September 23, whatever that was.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
When it was first declared for Gore, and I remember sitting in that room and thinking, well, the Mataura starts at Gore and it then goes into Southland, and thinking, like, I left that meeting not knowing when, knowing at some stage we were going to be having to join the declaration for Southland, but not actually knowing when, and then having those phone calls and having those questions about how long, and I didn't actually realise how long the river took to get from Gore down to Wyndham and Edendale, but with this kind of address that kind of, so yeah, in that situation we're going to know, right, it's in Gore now, it's going to be in Wyndham at this time, it's going to be in Tokanui at this time, and we can start to actually coordinate our response.
Yeah, we already have that information. It's about how we articulate that.
Yeah. That's why we declared it a regional emergency for that particular.
We didn't to start with, that was just
no,
Gore.
not at the beginning, no.
And then we potentially could have had that information being available, and enables us to front foot a lot of that stuff. So yeah, that was one of my sort of takeouts from that.
Well, I think the immediate risk was to Gore. But then when we analysed what information we did have, it was obvious it was going to impact further on from the Gore district. So it had to be made it as a regional basis.
That was 5 hours later, so yeah, what I'm saying,
Yeah.
like having this information would have been useful at the time.
Well, reading it right, that the changes to the Emergency Management Act are going to simplify that and make it a little bit easier to do.
We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
If they listen to our
We hope.
submission, maybe.
Right, so that was the first report. Is there any further discussion on that? Received report endorsed that the coordinating executive group review and provide feedback. We have a mover, please, for the recommendations. Mayor Bell, seconded by Mayor Scott. If there's no further discussion, all those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you. Proposed item 6.12, proposed staffing uplift for emergency management Southland. Yes.
So again, this is just more a note for the coordinating executive group, joint committee. I'm very well aware that emergency management Southland has a future. And given the changes in legislation, the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, and the changes that we've seen at the National Emergency Management Agency, there is going to be a requirement and an expectation that we are able to deliver a lot more than what we currently can. And again, acknowledging that the long-term plan's already gone through, so this is something that we will be looking forward for the next long-term plan. And I just wanted to make sure that this was on the table so that people understood my vision for the future of emergency management Southland. And also acknowledging that currently my team are all rounders because they are required to do a lot within their limited day-to-day BAU roles. Also acknowledging that in regards to planning, training and recovery, those are very strenuous roles that currently the whole team takes on board. So ideally in the future we'd like to have those filled so that we have specialists who are able to update our SOPs, who are able to work with our emergency service partners to ensure that we have alignments, as well as working with the communities to make sure that planning is going ahead with evacuations and mitigations, etc., etc. So also wanted to acknowledge that you'll see the tables. There was discussion around the numbers, and you'll read in the report that we have given you some figures around it. It was asked that the Chatham Islands be removed. However, when was speaking to the South Island group managers, they really wanted to acknowledge that the Chatham Islands is still currently a civil defence emergency management group, and removing them from the statistics would not make them very happy.
Well, don't excuse the average result, doesn't it?
It does skew the average result slightly, yes, but it's still regardless. So I think that would go up to 12,000, and that's still just sitting in that frame. So again, just want to note the report and something that me as the emergency management Southland group manager to look into for the next long-term plan.
Are those the recommendations? Do we have any discussions or questions? Yes, yes, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, and acknowledging the work that you've put into this and coming in with fresh eyes and having a good look. I think we might be missing a step in here, which would be quite nice to address in that workshop, to actually go through with the seven staff that you currently got. Seven?
Yeah.
Seven. Yeah. So to get a really good understanding of what their roles are, what they actually do, and I think when you look at that table and you look at Southland, even with the setup that we got here in the first place, which is quite sort of leading the way back in when this was set up, I think we've got the opportunity to rather look at what other people are doing and go, well, we need to do that because they're doing it. Actually have a really good look at what's the purpose of what we're doing, what are we trying to do, and how can we do this the Southland way, noting the strengths we've got in our communities because of that geographic kind of nature, and we can actually rely on our communities to step up in the times of trouble. But then also, I'd like to get an understanding of the BAU for your team. The accountant in me says you've got 7 staff at 40 hours a week, so that's 280 hours a week. So what do we get for the 280 hours a week? And that sounds a bit kind of blunt way to look at it, but from an accountability to our ratepayers point of view, we kind of almost need to get to that level, but also making sure that we're not burning out you and your team by loading out with too much. But it'd be quite good to have that workshop to get a really good understanding of how you see it. And where you look, I'd quite like to hear your vision for it going forwards as well.
It's going to be a good workshop.
So those things that we're looking for in that workshop all fitting together, aren't they? Coming together, right. So we have recommendations here, which to me seem quite plain. I'll move from the chair the 2 recommendations. Note the report and direct staff to explore viable options for addressing staffing and resource gaps. Seconded by Scott, thank you. Any further discussion? Not, put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you, Alan. The final, that is the next meeting. Do you have a suggestion?
Yes, we do. Friday, the 22nd of August. 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Happy to move.
This will be my last meeting.
Thank you for everything you've done. And all that you will continue to do.
Yes.
Will you not be at that next one?
Sorry?
Will you not be at the August one?
I'll be in Australia. Well, that's my plan at the moment. And flights are booked.
So you need the chair.
Come back on the 23rd. Yes, as a deputy. Who's the deputy chair? Yeah.
Want me to chair?
You be prepared. Thank you. Liaise with me as well. Right, so the recommendation is not put from chair to so the next meeting.
Sorry, are you just thinking about the workshop prior to the 22nd of August, and is that able to be
Locked in.
managed within that, and it might be useful to have that date quite soon?
Yeah, it will probably be beginning of August. But I can get some options out to you beginning of next week.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, so we agreed the recommendation is Friday, 22nd of August, for the next meeting for this group.
Which is already in our calendars, having been advised earlier in the year.
We just confirm it with the recommendation. I move from the chair that we do that. Seconded by. Yes, thank you. All those in favour, all say aye. It's already in there. So we have public excluded business.
Sorry, Chair, just before we go public, just want to back up what Abby said there before, and thank you for your chairmanship this term, for leading us through an emergency as well. You've done a good job at keeping this all together, and it's good to see that the team's all whole again, and building some really good momentum. So thank you for all the work that you've done, and throughout the many years that you've been involved with EMS as well. It really means a lot. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben. It's been my pleasure to be associated with the people around here. Public excluded business. We have, do you want to read that out, Jen? Some reasons for moving into public excluded.
Excluded, set out on page 87 of the
We'll
agenda.
we'll just wait until we are able to get offline.
No, we do this.
The
with-
resolution is
Oh,
public.
sorry.
Yeah. So it's actually printed in the agenda. Do you want it read out?
Happy to move based on what's written on the agenda.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. We moved to public excluded business for the reasons set out on page 87 of our agenda. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Carried. Now we're going offline now.
And having regard to ES's standing orders, can we have a 3-minute break?
Yeah, thank you, Simon, for your continued support for Southland. We appreciate it.